Hey everybody, it's NintenDude and welcome to the first episode of NinTech, where we take a look at Nintendo products and accessories for Nintendo consoles. Today we'll be taking a look at the PDP wired Pro Controller for the Nintendo Switch. For comparison, for its functionality and quality, we have the wireless Nintendo Switch Pro Controller beside it. For future reference throughout this video, I will be referring to the PDP wired Pro Controller as the wired controller and the wireless Pro Controller made by Nintendo as the wireless Pro Controller, so it's easy to differentiate throughout the video. So in front of us we have one of the many different wired Pro Controllers for the Nintendo Switch, specifically the one made by PDP with the swappable faceplates, and this one does come with two. It comes with the Mario and Luigi swappable faceplates. Now since this thing is wired, it always has to be powered, and it actually comes with a fairly long USB Type-C cable that plugs into the controller and needs to be plugged in at all times. This also means that there's no battery in this thing, but it also doesn't have a rumble feature or a gyroscope, so it's much lighter compared to the wireless Pro Controller. Plugging in the cable, however, is a little difficult since it does have a cutout which does not allow the cable itself to pass through that easily. It has a socket, but it's oddly tight and it doesn't really make a click sound or any sort of responsive feel when you plug it in, unlike the wireless one. Also, since there is a cutout for the socket it goes into, it is kind of difficult to see if it is plugged in all the way, so you have to have your console on to see if it's detected or not. The bottom and sides of the controller have a very nice textured feel to give a solid grip in your hands. There's no rubber on here or any substitute for it, and it's all plastic. The next thing we see, but probably the first thing everyone else saw, is the face of the controller, mainly the A, B, X, Y buttons. While feeling them, they do have a really good click response, but they feel very hollow, which I don't really like. The reason this feels so hollow is going back to the missing components of this controller, the lack of a rechargeable battery, gyroscope, and rumble. The button sizes are about the same. The one on the wired Pro Controller is a little bit smaller, but nothing too different there. Next, we'll take a look at the joysticks of the controller, and the first thing you'll see is that there's this nice texturized center of the joystick, and it is on both of them. This is to help keep your thumb on the joystick, but the texture of the rubber is already pretty slippery and does not let your thumb grab onto the joystick that long and tends to slip off after a few rotations. Comparing this back to the wireless Pro Controller, the rubber on this one is much thicker, and while it isn't texturized, it's made from a much denser material that lets your thumb rest properly. Both have textured rims, which are about the same if you do use your joysticks from the side, and this is something you might want to keep in mind. The D-pad, like the A, B, X, Y buttons, requires less force to press and has a hollow feel as well. Keep in mind the hollow feel is there because of the missing components. Going over to the shoulder buttons, these are probably my least favorite thing of the whole controller. The R and L buttons aren't the problem, but the ZR and ZL buttons is what's the most bothersome since they're the same size as the R and L buttons, and if not, just barely a bit bigger. On the wireless, there's a visibly noticeable difference as well as being able to tell while playing. But here, it's definitely possible to accidentally hit R instead of ZR since the size difference is so small. Heading back to the front, the plus, minus, home, and screenshot buttons feel very mushy compared to the wireless and requires very little amount of force to activate. It's definitely accident prone due to the fact that it's so close to the A, B, X, Y buttons, and the official Pro Controller does a much better job with them. They are about the same distance away from the A, B, X, Y buttons, but they do require a lot more force to accidentally press. Lastly, we have a few things that are not on the wireless Pro Controller, one of them obviously being the swappable faceplates. The Mario one comes with a Luigi one standard, but the other ones only come with one. Something I didn't know, because nobody mentions this, is that there are buttons under the controller. Yes, buttons under the controller. These are actually programmable buttons for custom play, but I haven't really found a use for them yet, and they aren't really customizable. They have a built-in function, like in Mario Tennis Aces, they bring up the control settings menu in the character select screen. Now, if you were ever looking for a Pro Controller to buy, but thought the wireless Pro Controller was too expensive, this controller comes in for a little less than half the price. It goes for around $25 to $30, while the wireless one goes for $70. But there's some things you have to consider if you're leaning towards this one, because this one always needs to be plugged into the dock. It doesn't have a USB-C out, it actually has a normal USB out type of cable, so it has to be plugged into the dock, or you need some sort of adapter if you're using it when your Switch is out of the dock. Personally, after using the wireless Pro Controller for so long, I can't find myself replacing that with this. But the main attraction of this controller is the price. You're getting everything that the wireless Pro Controller has, but you are missing some features that can actually affect your overall gameplay. Some of the things such as the wireless capability itself. You cannot unplug this, and if it does get unplugged, you're kind of in trouble. Something I didn't mention before, I didn't really test this until now, when you plug in the USB-C into the controller, it actually locks into place really tightly, so unplugging from the controller won't be an issue. The other thing is that you're going to be losing vibration. There's no vibration in this controller, and there's no gyroscope. So if you're playing a game like Splatoon and you use gyro controls, well, you have to either use your Joy-Cons or get the wireless Pro Controller, but this one doesn't have any gyroscope in it. Not only that, but if you're taking your Switch out a lot and you like using your Pro Controller on the go, this is not really the best idea or option for you, because you have to have some sort of adapter at all times, and to plug it in, since the USB socket is at the bottom, you need some sort of stand and adapter, so you need to carry a bunch more things with you for no reason. But if you're okay with dealing with all those things, this is definitely a good choice for you. It's not the controller is bad, but there are definitely some things you have to compromise if you want to get this one. Something not mentioned earlier is that the button at the bottom here actually disables the buttons on the back, so if you don't want to use those at all, you can just press this button and it'll lock those. But let me know what you think. Do you think there should be an alternative wireless controller from the one that already exists? Feel free to let me know, as well as any critiques on this new series, because I know one thing that needs to improve is my camera work. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of NinTech.